I was an Air Force pilot, fighter pilot. I flew tornadoes, and in 1991 I was involved in the first Gulf War, and I was shot down and captured and held by Saddam Hussein for 7 weeks in Baghdad, and subjected to brutality, physical and mental torture. And eventually I was paraded on television. And back then, it was the first live televised war. That image was transmitted globally. 650 million people in the planet saw it, they reckon. And through that, I suppose, made me famous for a short period of time, or notorious, whichever you wish. And so that is my background.
Can you tell us that at the moment of feeling a gun barrel against your head, what it felt like and what you meant by aiming to die nicely?
I suppose very similar to very many people in COVID, you feel isolated, and I was, 1,000 miles from everyone. And after halfway through captivity, you're taken through into a little room. You're naked. Two men kneel you down, and they put a gun against your head, and you hear the hammer going back, and you think, this is where I'm going to die. And at that moment, when they say the life flashes before you, I thought, I won't be defined by the experiences. I know why they want to do that and why they've been violent. I will choose to die as to who I am. And the word in my head was nice. I want to die nicely, because that was how people described my family. My English mistress, when I was young, said, never use the description nice. It's a meaningless adjective. But that was my word, that I wanted to die. So it becomes quite definitive, because it's enlivening, because you can't impress anybody else, and you don't want to die disappointing yourself. So that's why that becomes important.
John, it's a fascinating response that certainly sets you aside from others from the chat we had the other day. And I think it's a good example of really sort of seeing the bigger picture. That's why it's so important to use this time of change and uncertainty for people to see the bigger picture.
Yes, well, I think you get through some of, when your world is locked in a box and it's pitch black and you're getting beaten, you very much like that, the idea of your choice is still, you can choose to be yourself. So it's this reflection, internal reflection, and define yourself by yourself. But at the same time, if I looked at the walls and the beatings, I would have given in. And I think a lot of people are tending to look at the COVID at the moment at the end of their nose, whereas I go, look at the transformation. We've had 10 years worth of digital transformation in 9 months, 10 months. And I know it's frightening, and I know there's huge numbers of personal tragedies. But certainly in Britain, the conversation changed from the Brexit conversation that was really quite divisive to an inclusive, caring, compassionate conversation, and looking beyond some of the environmental stuff, and how a number of business leaders I work with and talk with saying, I don't want to go back to the old normal. It wasn't the right answer. So it's given us a fluidity to look beyond this and say the world has changed, and there are a whole load of positives, I think, that will come out of this, despite the tragedies.
Many people describe COVID and living in COVID as being in a very sort of dark times. I'm sitting looking at you with the sun streaming through your window, and you've talked about bigger picture, and you talked about positivity. So how, in this challenging time, do you ensure, for somebody who's had such an incredible background, make sure that you make good daily choices?
Well, I mean, in some ways I am at advantage. I mean, I didn't know what it was like to be a prisoner of war. And when you're put in solitary confinement and subject to the violence and blown up and all those sorts of things, you have to learn a new routine. So 45% of our habits we do on autopilot in everyday life. And now our world has been almost blown up, really. And so we're certainly, for those poor people who are in high-rise blocks, in small flats, etc., you go, how does that not descend upon you? And what you do is you have to create new routines. As I say, we tend to be habits, but to create new habits, we have to create new routines and learn how to adapt to this new environment so that you're not overwhelmed. So that's what I've been doing. Like anybody, I've been trying to do yoga, do fitness, very much get into a new routine of working from home.
Okay, so leading on from that, John, when we talked the other day, you talked to me about your version of flip-flops. Most people will think of that as a long-awaited holiday on the beach, but for you, it's something different. Would you care to share?
Yes, I mean, when you get overwhelming circumstances as a prisoner, actually your own worst enemy is yourself. It's your own imagination, because they just say walking past your cell and your imagination can spin out of control. So at times you have to control your imagination and your mindset. At other times where you have to pull into yourself and really find your identity and align yourself with your emotional sense and who you are and who you want to be. So it's a flip-flop between your identity and your imagination. And when one runs out of control, you say, no, this is who I am and this is my reality. And other times going, okay, the reality is overwhelming, say during a beating. So you then escape that through going elsewhere. So it's flip-flopping between emotion, identity, and how you think, and using those to your own advantage.
So all that you're sharing with us today really suggests that positive mindset and mindfulness is an absolutely critical aspect at this point, whether it's in personal life, whether it's in work. I feel a bit cheeky asking this question because you'll have had a lot of time to think about this. But the last question, if you had just 2 minutes left, what single piece of advice would you give someone?
Forgive yourself. We all have our expectations that along the way, we maybe disappoint ourselves, we feel vulnerable, or we don't live up to our expectations. And the real key is forgive yourself. And why is that? And I'm not particularly religious. By forgiving yourself, you don't go should have, couldn't have, why did I not? It means that by doing that, you're not living in the past and you're not blaming yourself. You're then in the present and you accept where you are, which opens you up to learning. So much of what we're doing currently in the COVID, it's a lesson. It's not a life sentence. And so the key to that is forgive yourself. If you didn't quite live up to who you wanted to be, that is, well, welcome to the human race. I didn't live up to anything I expected in captivity, but you forgive yourself, which means you just learn from the experience and move on. Learn, and every time you fall over, you learn, move forward. And that is, and with that in mind, from that moment on, I knew I could never lose.
John, a fascinating insight from somebody from a slightly different perspective, but whether our viewers sitting finishing their coffee and listening it from a personal perspective or from a professional perspective, I think it's such good advice. I think at the moment, somebody shared with me the other day, we all talk about control the controllables, but actually if you can't control things necessarily because of what's going on around you, don't chase it. So John, great to talk to you. I wish I had another 2 minutes and another cup of coffee. If anybody wants to see more of you, please contact our Inspirational Speakers website where we can get you in touch with John. He's got a lot more to give and a lot more to offer. So for the time being, John, on behalf of everybody, thank you very much for your time.
Lovely to speak to you. Enjoy the rest of your day.